Well, we're here right now, and we just saw in the distance Turkish rocket launchers launch rockets at Assad regime positions. And Operation Spring Shield here in Idlib province is in full force. We've also got confirmation that unfortunately one Turkish drone, an unmanned aerial vehicle, was actually brought down. But in that operation, two of the regime's air defense systems were destroyed. There is also confirmation that two Sukhoi 24 jets of the Assad regime were also shot down by Turkish forces. The fighting on the ground remains intense and in full gear. Opposition forces are advancing in the Jebel al-Zawiya region. Over the last 48 hours, they've taken at least 7 villages back from regime control. Opposition forces are also conducting operations further south of Saraqib. Saraqib they recently took from regime forces and have continued operations in the region there. People here in Idlib city are very excited that the Turkish Operation Spring Shield has started. They feel that they are safer now, that there are Turkish jets and Turkish drones in the air directly targeting regime positions that were targeting civilians here. Even people have come out into the streets, women and children. People were staying in their homes, in their buildings. People were not feeling safe to come outdoors. Today, we're actually seeing some activity here in the center of Idlib city. People are actually buying goods, coming and going. They are still concerned that the Assad regime will conduct retaliatory attacks on Idlib city and other populated areas in northern Syria. But since the announcement came that Turkey has started Operation Spring Shield, people are feeling optimistic and they are excited to see how Turkey is going to engage regime forces in the coming hours and days.
And Abida, just give us a sense of the geography.
You can hear now right in the background, actually. You can hear right now in the background. You cannot see what I see and hear what I see at this point. But as we speak, there is ongoing rocket fire from just outside of Idlib city towards regime positions. So that gives you an idea of how volatile the situation is here. The fighting had reached a point where regime forces were advancing very close to heavily populated areas like Idlib city, but they stopped at Saraqib and in the Jebel al-Zawiya region. And now opposition forces and Turkey have started Operation Spring Shield, and they are definitely they are definitely engaging regime forces in a very intense way. There's still rocket fire going on as we speak. It hasn't stopped now for about 45 seconds. Rockets continuously being fired at regime positions from here nearby in Idlib city.
And that's outgoing rocket fire, of course, hitting regime positions. And Abida, if you can, just lay out for us exactly the geography of how far away those front lines are and where those rockets, the destination of those rockets is.
Where we are right now is Idlib city center. If you go directly south, you will reach a town called Ariha, which is on the M4 highway, which runs east and west across Syria. After you cross Ariha, you go into a region called Jebel al-Zawiya. From Ariha to the front lines, it's about a 20-kilometer drive. The regime is in areas in Jebel al-Zawiya, but has been pushed back over the last 48 hours and is almost nearly completely cleared from the Jebel al-Zawiya region. The regime still controls some areas like Kafrembel and Has, but opposition forces are pushing back. That's about 20 to 25 kilometers from where we are right now. Saraqib is just a 15-kilometer drive southeast of where we are. Saraqib, the town, is actually cleared of regime forces. Opposition forces have now expanded their operations to towns and villages around Saraqib, clearing those places as well. That is just about 15 kilometers from where we are. And that gives you an idea of how close the regime was to reaching areas that are heavily populated like Idlib city and everything north of Idlib city towards the Turkish border.
And that push against those opposition forces will be, of course, continuing because this battle is very much raging as we're speaking. You mentioned talk of some civilians within the city. What is their current predicament? Where are they then looking to move to in the coming hours?
People are very excited and welcoming of the start of Operation Spring Shield. As I mentioned, people have actually come out into the streets. We've been in and out of Idlib city multiple times over the last several weeks. Today was the first time that we've seen people actually taking their families out into the streets to buy food. There are also some people in a park nearby. I won't specifically mention where that park is, but here in Idlib city, people are out in the streets and they feel safe enough to go out into the streets because there are Turkish aircraft above them. That's what people are telling us. They're telling us that now there is Turkish aircraft in the sky protecting us, attacking regime positions, preventing regime positions from firing rockets or launching attacks on Idlib city and surrounding areas, so they feel safe. People have been waiting for this kind of protection for some time now. The Assad regime displaced over 900,000 people since December, and people here are glad that now there is some air support for them because the Assad regime was able to fly multiple aircraft over Idlib city at any given time with the support of drones, artillery fire, missile fire, and rocket fire without any deterrence. Now, the Turkish role in the skies and on the ground here in Idlib province is a very strong deterrent to both the regime or its Russian backer, or even Iranian-backed militias who are attacking areas in northern Syria.
And Dubaida, as you mentioned earlier, there is now confirmation of two Syrian aircraft that have been shot down. Have you got any more detail as to how those craft were brought down? Was it rocket fire? Was it surface-to-air missile? Or was it, as you had suggested earlier, perhaps an air-to-air fight?
Right now, we don't have any confirmation from the Turkish Defense Ministry on how those regime jets were shot down. But opposition forces on the ground in the front lines reported that they witnessed a dogfight between a Turkish F-16 and one of these Sukhoi 24 jets. And they said that the F-16 fired a rocket at or a missile at the Sukhoi 24 jet, and it lit on fire and basically started falling out of the sky. There is another incident where Sukhoi jet was shot down. Two confirmed now shot down by Turkish fire. We're not sure exactly the circumstances that they were shot down in, but opposition forces say they witnessed F-16 Turkish fighter jets engaging at least one of these jets in the sky above the Jebel al-Zawiya region. While we were here in Idlib province, also in the city of Idlib, we heard anti-aircraft machine gun fire, and the jets that were flying around were very near Idlib city. There were multiple jets in the sky at the same time, including the Turkish aircraft that were in the sky, assumedly. So the airspace here is very crowded and it's very busy. There is ongoing mortar and artillery fire from here. We can hear it very clearly in Idlib city, and the fighting continues here as Turkey announces the launching of Operation Spring Shield.
And Dubaida, just describe for us how significant that is a development, that these fighter jets are now being shot down. The control of the air over the region is vital, of course, for military movements, and the fact that jets are now being shot out of the sky is a significant development.
This is an absolutely significant development. This is the highest escalation we've seen in the conflict here in northwest Syria for the last several months. Just yesterday, actually, the Assad regime announced that its airways were closed to all foreign aircraft. This was a political message, if you will, to Turkey. Turkey has been trying to get support from Europe and from the United States for protection of the airspace here in northern Syria. The biggest deterrence now to Assad regime aircraft here in northern Syria is the presence of Turkish jets and drones in the sky. There are some reports that also there are manpads on the ground. We haven't been able to confirm that. However, opposition sources have been reported to have used manpads to shoot down helicopters a few weeks ago. They shot down several of them, possibly two confirmed and a third one possibly as well. So the the helicopters being shot down prevented helicopters from coming to these areas. The regime developed a very rudimentary and vulgar weapon through these years of the conflict, which has become famously known as a barrel bomb. Many people around the world have witnessed regime helicopters flying over populated cities and dropping these barrel bombs that are filled with explosives and causing mass destruction and killing dozens of people at a time in some cases. Now that the opposition was able to down some of those helicopters, helicopters are no longer involved in the aerial activity in these parts of Syria. Now that jets have been shot down, it's going to be very interesting to see if regime jets are going to continue to fly around in these areas, conduct sorties in these areas, or even conduct aerial attacks in these areas, because 2 jets being shot down in one day is a huge escalation and is unprecedented as of yet here in northwest Syria.
Absolutely. Abaida Hitso for us in Idlib city. Thank you very much for that reporting. And Abaida,